everyone, welcome to the Three Bookshelves. My name is Tara. Today I'm going to be talking about my reading goals for 2018 and my absolute must-read books of this year. I know we're pretty much well into 2018 by now and it's a little late to be setting out reading goals, but I'm gonna do it anyway. I really just want all of this on record so I can hold myself accountable and at the end of the year look back on this video and these goals that I'm making and see how well I did, kind of grade myself for the year. First I'm going to go over all of my goals for the year and then I'm going to give you a list of all of my definite must-read books for 2018. So my very first goal, probably the most important one, is to read more. Since my son was born, I've had a tiny fraction of the time to read that I used to, so reading really fell to the wayside over the past couple of years. And free time I did have went to more important things like lying down and eating food. Once we got past that really tough newborn phase and I did start to have more free time, I put most of it towards writing instead of reading. But reading has always been a really important part of my life and it makes me really sad that I haven't gotten to do a whole lot of it in the past few years. So number one goal this year is to read more. Specifically, I want to try to read 25 books in 2018. That doesn't seem like a lot compared to a lot of other booktubers who read 100. I couldn't even read 100 books in a year when I had tons of time to read. But we'll try it out and see how it goes. That is roughly 2 books a month. I'm pretty ahead of the game so far, so I am confident that I'll be able to hit that 25 and hopefully I can push that goal even higher. My second goal for 2018 is to read new books rather than reread old books. I am a big rereader. I love rereading my favorite books. I have read the Harry Potter series at least 7 or 8 times. I've read one of my favorite books, Flowers in the Attic, probably 20 times in as many years. But who knows how many great books are out there waiting for me to read them, and I never will if I'm just rereading all my old favorites. So, new books over old books in 2018. There will be 2 exceptions to this goal. I do want to reread Ready Player One by Ernest Cline in preparation for the movie release in March, and I want to read Haunted by Chuck Palahniuk, which is actually my favorite Chuck Palahniuk novel, but I haven't read it in years, and I'd like to talk about that in a horror novel video for Halloween this year, so I'm going to be rereading that later on. My third reading goal for 2018 is to start to whittle down my TBR shelf. I think I own about 20 to 25 books that I've never read, and again, that's a much smaller number than I have seen on other booktube channels, but for me, that's a little ridiculous. So I want to read at least 6 books on my TBR shelf. And as a secondary rule, every book I buy this year needs to be read this year, because I don't want that 20 to shoot up to 30 or 40. Goal number 4 is to read a wide variety of genres and authors. I'm usually pretty good at this, but I definitely still have my comfort zone, and I don't want to get stuck in it this year. I want to alternate. Every book I read is going to be a vastly different genre than the one before. So if I just read a fantasy, I might jump to contemporary chick lit, and then I might go to sci-fi, and then I might do a classic, who knows? I just want to keep the ball rolling and not get stuck in one little niche. As a side goal to that, I want to branch out and read genres that I typically shy away from, like classics and literary fiction and historical fiction, and I want to read more YA. In the past, I have really stayed away from YA. I have this idea in my head of what is YA based on some not so great YA books I have read, and the more I do read YA, the more I find books I really love. Like the Lunar Chronicles. I was so hesitant to read those because they're YA, and they ended up being my 3rd favorite series of all time. So who knows what other great books and series are out there that I'm missing out on just because I have the stigma of YA in my head. So, more YA. And my 5th reading goal for 2018 is to read my very first audiobook. I have always stayed away from audiobooks in the past because when I'm reading, my mind wanders and I have to often reread sentences or paragraphs because I just wasn't paying enough attention. The words went right over my head. And that's too much of a hassle to do with an audiobook. I don't want to stop and rewind and re-listen to things all the time. Another problem I have always had with the idea of audiobooks is I am not the kind of person that can sit there and listen to something. And now that I have a toddler, I don't have a lot of opportunity to listen to an audiobook while I'm doing other things because my other thing is my son. But I did come up with the idea to color in adult coloring books while I listen to this audiobook. I'm hoping that'll keep my hands busy and the other half of my mind engaged while I listen to it so that it doesn't start wandering and so I don't fall asleep. I'm curious to know what you guys do with audiobooks. How do you listen to them? Do you have any other suggestions of what I can do while I listen to them? Please let me know down in the comments. I could probably use a few tips. My very first audiobook will be My So-Called Perfect Life by Sophie Kinsella, based on Heather from Bookables saying so many times that she loves Sophie Kinsella audiobooks, that if you have the option to read an audiobook over read the physical book, do it with Sophie Kinsella. That is going to be my very first audiobook ever. And now let's have a look at all of my absolute must-read books for 2018. First, as I already mentioned, Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, one of my absolute favorite books of all time, and I wanted to reread it early this year in preparation for the movie that's finally coming out in March. This was actually my first read of the year, and it was just as good as I remember it being. Next are my auto-read authors who have books coming out this year. First is Marissa Meyer, the sequel to Renegades. I think it's going to be called Anarchists. Should be coming out in October or November. Also, Wires and Nerve Volume 2 Gone Rogue, the second part of the graphic novel duology that is a continuation of the Lunar Chronicles. This I've been waiting very, very anxiously for. Very excited to finally read it. And a new auto-read author for me who I just discovered last year is Victoria Schwab. I believe she will have Vengeful out this year. That's the sequel to Vicious, but I know that she threw out the first draft. She is a very fast writer, but who knows if it's actually going to get done and published this year. I also want to read The Archived and the sequel The Unbound this year. I have read Victoria Schwab's other YA duology, but I haven't gotten to this one yet, so this is on my list for the year. Next are 3 books from some of my favorite authors and some of my favorite book series. I've had these books for a long time and for some reason have not read them yet, so has to happen this year. Prince Lestat by Anne Rice. This is, I don't know if it's a reboot or a continuation of the Vampire Chronicles. I don't care what it is, I have to read it. It's Lestat, I love Lestat, I love the Vampire Chronicles, I love Anne Rice, so this absolutely needs to get read this year. In the same vein, Knights of the Seven Kingdoms by George R.R. Martin. It's not really a part of the Song of Ice and Fire series. It happens, I think, about 100 years before the events of A Song of Ice and Fire, but it's in the same world. I have been wanting to read the stories of Dunk and Egg for so long, and when this collection finally was released, I think 2 years ago, I was so excited that I could finally read them all in one place, and I haven't yet. I don't know why. I waited so long. What am I waiting for? So this has to be one of my early reads for 2018. And third is Damned by Chuck Palahniuk, and probably the sequel, I think, is Doomed. I bought this book as soon as it came out, and I just never got into it. I started a couple of times. I think I got 2 or 3 chapters in and just put it down for one reason or another. So this year is going to be the year that I finally finish Damned by Chuck Palahniuk. Around Halloween, I will be reading some horror novels and talking about horror novels here on my channel, and one of the books I want to read for that is Haunted by Chuck Palahniuk. As I mentioned before, I have already read it. It's my favorite Chuck Palahniuk book, but I need to reread it so my mind is fresh so I can talk about that in a video. And a book that has been on my shelf for a very long time, Pet Sematary by Stephen King. Now, I love horror. I love horror novels. I love horror movies. None of it ever scares me. But I have been so terrified to read this book all of my life because animals. I can't stand when animals get hurt or are killed or mistreated in any way. And my mom warned me that this book would probably be hard for me to read. So I have been scared of it all my life. But it is a classic horror, a classic Stephen King. So I think I need to read this book this year. Next is a book I actually kind of bought myself for Christmas. Harry Potter, A History of Magic by J.K. Rowling. I am a massive, massive Harry Potter fan, so as soon as this book came out, my mind was blown. I couldn't wait to get this book and to read it. If you haven't seen this yet, it is chock full of notes and illustrations from J.K. Rowling herself, of stuff that she scribbled down when she was planning and writing Harry Potter, and it's got tons of stuff about the subjects that they learn at Hogwarts, and just lots of background information, and I love that stuff. When it is a series that I sincerely love, I need to know everything I can about it. As I mentioned before, My So-Called Perfect Life by Sophie Kinsella will be my very first audiobook ever. Next up, Illuminae by Amie, Kaufman, and Kristoff, possibly the other books in the series if I end up really liking this. It's told in a series of files and reports and emails and IMs and all that kind of stuff. That is a really interesting way to read a book, so I am excited to read this, and I am also excited to finally know what the hype is, what everyone is talking about, because everyone on BookTube talks about this series, so I will finally be in the know. Another YA book I want to read this year, but I don't actually have yet, is The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. The Hazelwood is about a girl whose grandmother was the author of a cult classic fantasy series set in a fictional land, and after her grandmother dies, the girl realizes that this world actually exists, and she gets to go there and solve some kind of mystery. I want to read this book because it is actually quite similar to the book I am writing myself, and every time I come across a similarity like that, I need to read that other book. One, to make sure I'm not stepping on any toes, to make sure that my story will be original in the end, and also for some inspiration to see how that kind of thing is done in other novels. So The Hazelwood, as soon as I heard about it, I thought, I gotta read that. And that's it for my reading goals for 2018 and my must-read books for this year. Let me know down in the comments, what are your reading goals? Do you have any goals in common with me, and how are you doing with them so far? Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, why don't you subscribe so you can catch more of my videos. Until then, happy reading, everybody. Bye.